First story. Entitled Son verbally abused and falsely claimed my husband sought him to his homophobic friends, causing my husband to leave me. So I grounded and kicked my son out of my house. Now he wants to come back, saying he abused his stepdad to escape his friends' bullying. This entire situation is kind of F-ed, and honestly, I'm a bit heartbroken for my husband. Real names. I'm Sean, 37, my husband is Zach, 36, and my son is 16, and not saying his name. I divorced my ex-wife after she cheated on me for the entirety of our marriage. That was over a decade ago. I don't care anymore, son is mine, already over and done. I met Zach when I was 28, and my son was 7. Me and Zach hit it off instantly. I was finally in a place to start dating again, and thankfully he was the first person I was interested in. We connected on everything me and my ex-wife did, and a million more things. People say life has a plan for you, and honestly, I believe it. I'd go through a million more divorces and be cheated on over and over if I ended up with him every time. One of the big things was my son. Zach was hesitant at first, just because of the situation. But he wanted a family badly, and I was excited for him to meet my son. After dating for a year, I talked to my ex and told her I'm introducing our son to a guy I'm seeing, told her it's serious, and I see a future with him. She was happy for me. We have a very good relationship now. She just told me to tell her when I was going to do it, so she could be prepared if our son had any questions for her when he visited next. Zach and my son were best friends. Did everything together. They loved playing Minecraft together. They spent hours sitting in front of the TV. I loved watching them. I was so effing happy the first person I found after my ex was this amazing. After about 6 months, I asked Zach to move in, and the rest is exactly as I've been describing. Amazing. My son started calling Zach his other dad when he was 10. Very sweet moment, which makes this hurt worse. Well, last weekend my son had 3 of his friends over. They were playing video games in his room, and I just left to do grocery shopping for the week, so it was just them and Zach. I don't know how this topic came up, but things got very homophobic. My husband was sitting on the couch, and I guess my son and his friends thought me and him left. But it was just me. My son's room is connected to the living room. So if you're sitting in the living room, it's not super hard to hear what's going on in his room, if he's being loud enough for teenage boys playing video games. One of them said how it feels to have a F slur. I don't know if I can say it or not on here as a father. My son laughed and said something kind of SHTTY. They said my husband probably touched him when he was little, and my son replied, he can try it now, he'll get his arse beat. So not even being a DCK to Zach, but now also threatening him over something we all know he would never do. They kept saying SHT like. Which one do you think takes it in the arse? Probably the F slur. At least your real dad still likes women. Just a bunch of hateful SHT. My husband sat there listening to it all, silently crying. Also, Zach has spent good 4 hours a day at the gym for the last 3 years. So I don't know who's getting their arse beat, but it ain't him. I got home about 2 hours later to my husband sitting in his car, with a bag packed waiting for me, so he could leave, but didn't want to leave my son alone. I asked what's going on and why you're leaving, and he told me everything. I tried to understand as best I could. I insisted he wasn't serious. He was just being a stupid kid acting tough with his friends, but it didn't matter, the damage was done. Zach left, and I went inside and went off on my son. His friends left, and I spent a good 3 hours going back and forth with my son. At first he was very unapologetic and kind of agreed with his friends. I asked if he actually thought my husband sexually abused him when he was younger, and he said, no, but kids block those kinds of memories out, so really, who knows? I told him to pack his SHT. He's living with his mother. Info. His mom lives 3 hours away, which means new school, new friends if at all, less private space as he'd have to share a room with his stepbrother, etc. Just everything that you'd expect going from a single kid in a house to one of 4. My son instantly changed his attitude. He was crying and begging me not to send him away. He didn't mean it. He was just lying to seem cool to his friends. I asked why he doubled down when they left, and he didn't have an answer. I told him to pack his SHT. He's leaving in the morning. I called my ex and told her the situation, and she agrees he needs something drastic. What he did wasn't okay at all. Fast forward to now, and my husband is back, but he cries every night. Honestly, it feels like he's mourning, which I don't want, because when you mourn, you don't get over someone. You get as close to indifferent as possible to keep living your life without them. I don't want that. I want my husband and my son to have that strong bond I know they have, and don't want them to throw it away over this. I don't agree with what my son did, But those accusations at minimum can ruin someone's life, and at most end it. I'm disgusted with my son. He calls me every day and tells me he misses me and Zach and wants to come home. I stay strong on the phone, but after I break down, my husband tries to console me. Tells me my son can come back, and he will leave. But no, I'm not doing that. I just don't know what to do. I miss my son. I miss coming home and seeing them spending time together. I've thought about therapy for him, but he said no. You can't force therapy on someone. They'll just sit there for an hour and piss away $400. I need advice. Comments. Stoner Therapist 89. NTA. Therapist here. But obviously everyone is different, so take it with a grain of salt. Parenting is sometimes wildly difficult, and this is one of those times. You did exactly the right thing. There are so many lessons for your son to learn here. Just name a few. He needs to not only learn the consequences of his actions, but that some things truly cannot be taken back. Trying to be cool by being an arsehole for absolutely no reason will not end well. It will not only alienate the people who actually care about you, but the people who get off on being unkind will eventually turn on you too. Most people do not get along with their step-parents, and he has been taking that for granted. Separately, if you let him back and Zach leaves, your relationship with your son will be forever altered, as well as your son's life in general. All the love Zach has for him, and their connection can be repaired once he gets his head out of his arse. If Zach leaves, your son will know he ruined his father's relationship for the rest of his life. The guilt and resentment from that can cause huge problems later on in life. This can be worked on. It can be resolved. I strongly suggest making family therapy a requirement for moving back into the house with an LGBTQIA+ friendly therapist who can get down to the root of how harmful this was and make him understand that. Individual therapy is also a great idea, but family dynamic stuff needs to take priority. Grimwall. This is great advice, but considering the man alleged he was possibly a pedophile, OP's husband clearly isn't going to risk his future on someone who is capable of being that callous. I wouldn't either. This is fixable, but it doesn't mean it will be. It's not any different if a blended family comes together and the daughter accuses her stepdad of touching her. There was literally a post 2 months ago about this exactly. He moved out, divorced the mom, and refused to stop the divorce once she confessed her biological dad put her up to it so he could F with the mom. Kid thought dad would come back if it happened. Newsflash, he didn't. That said, everyone told him that his future wasn't worth risking it. Just because he didn't get a full-on accusation and a police investigation doesn't mean he should be asked to risk it. I'm saying the same here. Zach said he would move out if the son came back. I think we are likely beyond counseling, at least for a while, certainly not while he's a minor. There is hope in the future though, and this is the way. Curious Penguin Socks. Yep, I wouldn't risk it. And neither should Zach. Some things cannot be taken back. Some harms cannot be undone. Pins and Beetles. I tell my kids this when we talk about choosing our words. Words are like toothpaste. Once you squeeze it out of the tube, it's almost impossible to put it back. Judgment. NTA. Update. 2 days later. This will be long. Sorry. Not going to lie. The entire OG post was basically a disaster. I expected a few replies, with only one actually being helpful, and then the post died. Didn't happen that way. Wish it did, though. So much back and forth and so much hate towards me being gay. I expected some, but holy SHT. I was done with that post when someone suggested me and my husband both abuse my son as cruelly. Just no. Disaster. I thought living in bum F Montana was bad with the homophobic SHT I deal with. As for the update, I spent the day yesterday with my son. A lot of people accused me of not taking his claims seriously. I did. The first 30 minutes of our initial talk, when this all happened, were about whether he actually was abused. He said no. I asked again when I got here. I made sure to let him know there is no one I'd believe over him. He won't be punished for saying the truth if he was abused for not. But I needed to know. Again, he said no. He was never touched or sawed by my husband. On to the questions and his answers. Why would you say something so dangerous? My son said he was feeling rejected by my husband since, as of late, he hasn't been spending nearly as much time with him. Which is true. A large part of my husband's life is my son. Zach tutors him. He coaches him in his sport basketball. He goes on morning runs with my son. He used to drive him to and from school before my son got his car. Just they both share a lot of interests. And as a kids-to-parent dynamic, they spend a lot of time together. Towards the end of last year's summer, when my son was still at his mother, my husband talked to me. He said he wanted to start spending more time apart. But not that kind of apart. He wanted to have more of a social life. He wanted to be able to do things away from us, but not like separate, if that makes sense. He realized my son would be leaving for college in 2-ish years, and my son was such a large part of his life. He didn't want to become depressed after he left with nothing to do. I agreed, saying it was a good idea, and he had my full support as long as he still came home every night at a reasonable time and didn't let his relationship with my son suffer or anything. As of now, yes, it is different. My son doesn't need rides to school. He doesn't need tutoring. He doesn't do basketball anymore. Their hobbies are still the same, but my husband has been spending less time at home. It's not like he's gone all hours of the day and comes back at 3 a.m. But he has a healthy social life. I don't know how to explain it. Do you realize how dangerous it is to say something like that if it isn't true? He said yes, and he didn't think anyone was listening. He was just going along with his friend's SHT. That didn't make sense to me, so I asked why he stood by his statement after I sent his friends home. He said he thought he shouldn't back down from something he says. Kind of like a ride or die, I don't know. I told him that's effing stupid and never do that, especially if he regrets what he said, and it wasn't true in the first place. He said he knows he realized that when it happened, but he just couldn't stop himself from keeping it up. It didn't hit him that it was serious until I told him he was going to stay with his mother. Why do you want to be friends with people that talk so much SHT about your parents? He doesn't want to. But the kids bully the SHT out of everyone they don't like, and he feels like he's in too deep to back out now. That I do understand. I had kids in my school like that. Bully everyone. They were cool to me, though, until they found out I was gay. Then they F-ed my last few years of high school up. I told him I get it to some degree, but he doesn't have to add in to what they're saying. A small chuckle and a F-you are usually enough to get people to move on from something. I also asked about them bullying him because they kind of were. He said yeah, but they're not that bad with it. They just rip into him every so often about having gay dads. And I guess over time it made my son feel poorly towards my husband. The distance my husband was setting with my son mixed with his friends saying the shut they do just added up to that. I told him I understood. I want to make it clear. I don't support what he said. I understand the emotions behind it, though. Why didn't you talk to us about how you were feeling? He said he didn't want to start anything. My husband and him are still close. He didn't know how he felt and was more confused than anything. So why say something that would cause a fight if he didn't even know if he felt that way? I also understood this. At this point, I think this is just one miscommunication after another. Open dialogue would have prevented all of this from happening. There were a lot more questions, but me and my ex ended with, do you actually feel remorseful for what you said? Or are you just tired of sleeping in the same room as a 7-year-old? He's actually regretful. He told me even if he was staying there all year, he would still feel terrible over what he said about Zach. I assured him again that if anything did happen, now is the time to speak, and I will believe him again. He said no. He started crying, saying he just missed us. The emotional moment we hugged told him I loved him, and that would never change. Ask him to leave the room so me and his mother could talk. We decided on a month-to-month assessment to see when he would get privileges back, ending with him coming home. There were conditions to all of this, like family therapy and solo therapy, cutting his friends off completely, which I would help with. He was against the solo therapy, but came around. He asked if Zach was here. I said no, but would ask him if he wanted to come next time, which my son smiled at. I still agree sending my son to my ex-wife's was the right move. A lot of people aggressively disagree, which is fine. My parenting style isn't for everyone. One of you told me I should beat the kids up, though, so, do I really care if some of you disagree with how I pray? Situation still stinks. I don't know what to say. I miss my son. He isn't coming home right now, and I wish I was leaving her house with him. As it stands right now, son is living with his mother and her family. He will get his phone, PS5, and car back at the end of the first, second, and third months in that order. He will be able to move out of the room he's currently in and out into the guest house at the end of month 4. Every month after that is touch and go. And we'll discuss at the end of each month what we think. Son will do biweekly solo therapy. And we will all do biweekly family therapy. We see it as he should do solo therapy 1 week, then family therapy the next. He can come back sooner. I want him back. My husband wants him back. He's wanted him back since he left. His mother is holding strong, but she also sees he's just miserable. So I think she'll break at some point and give up the guest house early. It is what it is. At the end of the night, my son asked if Zach would want to hear from him so he could apologize, and I told him yes. I told him yes a few times now, and Zach would love to hear from him. I doubt he'd have to wait longer than one ring before Zach picked up. My son called him as I was leaving, so I know they spoke. I don't know about what, though. When I got home, Zach was feeling like SHT and blaming himself more for all of this. I told him it's no one's fault. We just needed to talk to each other more. All in all, I think my son is remorseful, and he was just feeling trapped and isolated in a SHTTY situation and didn't know how to get out of it. I feel for him, and I wish I saw what was happening sooner. Thank you all for the advice. Or most of you. Some of you were just nasty and hateful. Someone on my first post called a stoner therapist something like that and gave good effing advice. I didn't say it on that post, but if you read this good SHT, thanks for it. The next update will be when he comes home. Hopefully it will be soon. Thanks y'all. Comments. Fuzzy Girl 6576. Hey, it sounds like you've had a heck of a roller coaster. Family dynamics can turn into a jigsaw puzzle, where half the pieces are hiding under the couch cushions. You did what you thought was best in a tough situation, and it's clear you care deeply for your son and your husband. Props to you for navigating such choppy waters, and for keeping communication open, even when it's as fun as stepping on Legos in the dark. It's great to hear that you're setting up some therapy. It's like oiling the squeaky wheels of family interaction. Just remember, healing and understanding take time, like fine wine or figuring out why the printer won't work even though it's plugged in and the Wi-Fi is fine. Keeping my fingers crossed that your family puzzle comes together smoothly, even if it takes a bit more searching under the furniture for those missing pieces. Here's to hoping the next update is full of good news and homecomings. Alternate account AITA. Screw those RC hats that show hate. It sounds like you have a wonderful battle plan in action. I hope your son makes the right choices in friends going forward. OP's comments in the Boru post. Self-intersection. OP not being able to explain his husband's reasoning or anything about his new, healthy social life is weird. OP explained everything else so clearly. OP? My husband was in an accident 5-ish years ago. His social life ended when he lost his job. His social life became my son and my ex-wife. I'd want more too. He's a social person. What am I not explaining clearly? Second story. I cut ties with my entitled parents after they demand I give up my inheritance to them because they are pregnant with a 6th baby they can't afford and be a babysitter, giving up my college dreams. Now mom has miscarried, and they blame me, calling me a witch and a monster. I am F19, my parents' second child. I have 3 brothers, 21, 13, and 7, and a sister, 16. We grew up poor, and our parents were often dependent on financial help from relatives, friends, etc. for raising us. This is because even though my dad has a mediocre job and my mom doesn't work, they just kept on popping out one kid after another. My parents are very religious and believe that children are a gift from God. Personally, I think that's total BS. My parents' reproductive choices wouldn't bother me if it hadn't caused mine and my siblings' lives to turn to SHT. While growing up, we never had new clothes or toys. We had to accept handouts from family members who were better off. We never went out or did anything fun. To top it off, we were well aware that the rest of the family looked down on us for constantly asking for handouts. Now, my older brother and I have managed to get into good colleges and are looking forward to a future that would be better than our parents' lives. He and I were staying at our parents' place for a while due to the COVID-19 lockdown. One morning, my parents called all 5 of us into the living room. Mom said she had great news. The smile that was forming on my face died a quick death when she said, "We're pregnant." I lost my temper. I asked them how they could be so stupid and irresponsible. Do they not have enough financial troubles already that they have to bring in another mouth to feed? My older brother tried to calm me down, but I was livid. After a lifetime of scarcity because of my parents' stupidity, they still hadn't learned their lesson. I asked them how they planned to provide for the kid. My dad told me I would have to give up the money our great-uncle had left me. He had left all 5 of us some money, which only we could access when we turned 18. I said, "Hell no. That money would help pay for my college expenses." He called me selfish for not being there for family. I told them if they couldn't provide for the kid, they should get an abortion. My mom started crying and called me a heartless monster. Dad told me he was disgusted with me. I told them there was no way I was going to pay for their stupidity, and the only thing I would be willing to pay for is a termination. What I was really worried about was my siblings' lives getting even worse. My older brother and I have escaped our parents' clutches, but the others, especially my younger sister, will be expected to help take care of this baby. No teenager deserves to have their adolescence ruined by diapers and a screaming baby. I know what it's like, as I had to go through that. It was expected of me to be an unpaid nanny to my younger brothers and sister. My older brother could go out with his friends and have fun, but I had to stay home and help give baths and feed the toddlers. I decided to get some family members involved so they could talk some sense into my parents. I called my mom's maternal cousin. She's one of my favorite people. When I told her that mom and dad were having another kid, she reacted with, "What? Again?" I told her everything and how they expected me to hand over my inheritance. She said she was going to speak to my parents and told me not to sign over anything. I promised her I wouldn't. Of course I won't. I also called two of my first cousins, one of whom is an accountant, so she could explain to my parents how much of a financial liability this baby is going to be and try to convince them to either abort or give it up for adoption. I moved out of my parents' home a few days ago. I was only going to stay there till the lockdown was relaxed, but I just can't bear to listen to my mom's nagging about how this baby is a blessing and that I want to kill it. I've moved into a friend's basement for a minimal rent. My mom's cousin paid them a visit about a week ago and tried to tell them they weren't doing this child any favors by bringing it into a life of poverty. My mom was very rude to my aunt and told her that a woman who chose to remain barren will never understand a mother's love. My aunt never wanted kids nor had any. One of the reasons she's my fave. My dad told her to get out. Aunt told me there was nothing she could do, but she did try. I didn't blame her. The cousin tried to explain the economic impact this kid would have, and my mom cried about how everyone was trying to take away her baby. WTF. The intervention didn't do SHT. So now that I've decided to cut contact with my parents, I just can't watch my family slide further and further into a hellhole. I'll be maintaining contact with my sister 16 just to make sure my parents can't brainwash her. My older brother is going to stay in touch with all of them, which is a good thing as he can act as a link between me and the other siblings if my parents ever forbid them from talking to me. Otherwise, I'm done with these people. Edit. I want to thank all of you for your kind and supportive comments, and for the awards as well. Relevant comments. My parents can't touch the money. Only my siblings can withdraw it when they turn 18. My sister will be 18 in a year and a half, and I've explained to her that she's going to need it for college. Hopefully I was able to convince her. My brother will be staying there till the lockdown is lifted. I'm glad he's there, actually, as he can be my eyes and ears for what's going on over there. His inheritance has already been spent on his college expenses. Update. Yesterday afternoon, I got a call from my older brother. He told me that my mom has miscarried. This is hardly surprising as she's in her 40s. I felt a huge wave of relief wash over me. My siblings' lives would not be worsened by my parents' insistence on adding another mouth to feed on an already tight budget. My sister would not be asked to give up her inheritance so they could have money for their new baby. My brother told me my mom had been crying, and while I did feel bad for her, I was still glad to hear about the miscarriage. I feel like we all dodged a huge bullet. Bro asked me to move back in for a while to help comfort my mom. I told him I wasn't going to move in because 1. My college would reopen in a few days, and 2. I'm done with all the family drama. However, I did agree to come visit my mom, if only out of courtesy. In the evening, I went over to my parents' place. I took chocolate chip muffins for my mom, which I know she likes. My sister greeted me at the door and told me mom had been in bed all day. After greeting my dad, I went into their bedroom. Mom was sitting up on the bed. I told her I was sorry about what happened and placed the muffins on the bedside table. She looked at me angrily, then threw the muffins at me. She screamed at me that she had lost her baby because of me. She said I had caused her stress, and it's what caused her to miscarry. She said I was probably glad her baby was dead, which is true. But of course I didn't point that out. She called me a witch and said I had wished this upon her. She was screaming so loudly that all my siblings and my dad came rushing to the bedroom. She yelled at me to get out. I did. I hugged my older brother and sister. Before I left, my dad told me my mom was right that my cruelty caused her to miscarry. I told him that was a grossly unfair accusation and reminded him that at mom's age, it was quite common to miscarry. Then I walked out. I'm so done with my parents and their stupidity. I can only hope they won't try for another kid. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.